Hello, I'm Dave Frykman. In this video I'm going to show you how I carved, painted and finished this little fellow. He's carved from a piece of eastern white cedar. Let's get started.
The piece of wood I'm using here is a piece of cedar that I've cut from a split log. I'll take a log maybe 15 inches long, split it into 4 pieces, and then take each of the pieces and slice them on a diagonal on a bandsaw. So I'll wind up with 8 pieces like this that I can make this particular carving out of. I think I've actually sped up this part of the carving to keep the video at a reasonable length, but I really wanted to put all of the carving process on the video. Right now I'm using my 4.5-inch grinder with a disc of sandpaper, about 50 grit I think it is. It works very well. It doesn't last all that long, but they're not expensive and easily replaced. It's a nice roughing tool. Here I've moved to a die grinder. It's actually a DeWalt tool used in the sheetrock industry to cut out holes for your switches and outlets. I find it works rather well and the price is right. I do have large hands, so someone with smaller hands may have to find a different tool. Here I'm using a structured carbide bit, which is a very aggressive bit, and it allows me to carve quickly. Cedar is a dry cedar is a very brittle wood that comes off as a fine dust, so I'm again working inside my dust collector booth. I'm outside, my hands and the tools are inside, and there's a dust collector drawing the dust away, so I don't have to wear a dust protector on my face or anything like that. Just ear protection, because the dust collectors are rather noisy, not to mention the tools. So I've muted the sounds from the tools in these clips. Here I've gone back to my switching back and forth on tools. This tool is a smaller version. It's a Black & Decker, it looks like, a smaller version of the die grinder that I used initially, and it again has a structured carbide bit. I use the barrel-shaped bits to, I find they do all the cuts that I need done. I don't particularly care for the round end bits or the cone-shaped bits. So structured carbide, barrel-shaped bits. This one is an 1/8-inch shaft. These are readily available at a craft store. Always wear leather gloves, though. That's very important to protect your hands. I cut my finger again in the kitchen yesterday, but I have yet to cut myself or injure myself seriously carving, because I always wear the proper protective gear. Right now I'm putting the final details on the face. I'll switch next to a carbide bit that's not a structured carbide, but just a normal carbide bit, sort of like an end mill, that I'll clean it up with. This is a nice clear piece of wood. I don't have to deal with any knots, but one advantage of the tools that I use is they do go through knots with relative ease, and I can carve right around and through the knots. I've switched now to another tool that has the regular carbide bit, and I'm just cleaning up the sharp edges, putting in some details with this bit. It's a very simple piece to carve. When I'm done, I'll run it through the flap sander to take some of the fuzzies off, and then I'm going to put a layer of shellac on it. The shellac firms up the wood and holds the fuzzies up nice and tall, so when I go back with the flap sander, it takes them off and leaves a nice finish that I like. Some people don't like using flap sanders because it tends to round off the sharp edges, but I find it I find it a pleasant look. I'll also mention that when I carve, I will generally be doing 10 or 20 or even more of these similar pieces at the same time. Frequently I'll complete all the work with one tool, and then I'll pick up another piece of wood and use the same tool on that one and do them in stages. I find that I get into kind of a rhythm when I do that. I call it the Henry Ford method. I've also finished the base of this piece before I started carving it. I flatten it nice and smooth on a big 12-inch disc sander. That way I don't have to struggle with making the base flat after I've painted and finished the piece. It's ready to go when I'm ready to finish. I see here I'm just putting in the final bits of detail that I want on the beard. I don't put in every hair. I'm not really a perfectionist as far as that goes. Most important to me is the expression on the face, and I'll leave the fine details and burning in hairs and so forth to others. Now I've decided that I'm going to put in some green ivy on his hat. The next stage after this bit here is going to be putting shellac on the piece, but following that I'm going to be putting a good layer of polyurethane, water-based poly, on the piece, probably 2 or 3 layers in fact. I would mention that cedar is a particularly difficult wood to put a white paint on because the tannins in cedar tend to come through, maybe not immediately, but over a period of months or years, and it tends to discolor the white. I've learned that the hard way, that you really need a good layer of something very impermeable between the paint and the wood to protect the white. So here we go with the shellac, just showing you putting the shellac on. I think I've hit it with a belt, with a brush sander just a bit. Most important, after the shellac dries for a day, here's the flap sander. It's just a simple Sandoflex sander in my little drill press. Very quick and easy process, but gives me the finish that I really like. And here goes a coat of poly on the piece to protect it, especially over the face and the beard area that's going to be white. Here we go. I'm using a standard craft white paint that you can get in any craft store, an acrylic white paint. I'm going to put several layers on. I'll just show you the one layer, but after several layers I'm going to go to a flesh color and put the flesh on. Like I said, I'm doing a number of pieces at the same time, so I'll put the flesh on all the pieces. That way I don't have to sit and wait for it to dry when I come back with the next color. I don't think I'm going to make you watch the entire painting process. Yeah, I skipped a little bit here. Now I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to put the dark red and then the dark green on the hat and the detail on the green leaves. The purpose of the dark red is to make the bright red stand out when I come back and put the bright red on. I'll do the same with the dark green here, putting the dark green on, come back later and blush it with a light green. Next step, I'm going to do the eyes. The eyes, I start with a white. I like the eyes looking off to the side on these fellas. Gives them a little bit of a mischievous look. Next is the blue. I don't pay much attention to how far down I'm coming with the color, because I'm going to come back with my flesh color and give him narrow down the eyes and give him kind of a squint. I find it gives the expression to the eyes. This is the black, And next I'm going to put a layer of brown on the upper lid. Very important. If I don't do that, it tends to have a vacant look. But this takes care of that nicely. This is a little trick that it's not original with me. If you ever look at Hummels, they use this trick as well, as do a lot of other makers of little figurines. And then the lower lid, using these paints, I can just come along and narrow down the eye and give him a laughing look, a smiling eye. There we go. And then a little toothpick with some white paint to give a little glisten in the eye, a little sparkle. I think Santa's supposed to have a sparkle in the eye. Okay, now I'm going back with the bright red. Stands out nicely over the darker red, gives it some depth, and then the bright green over the darker green. And the final step is to blush the face with sort of a peachy color. Give Santa his bright red nose. I wet the face first. That way the paint doesn't have a scratchy look. It kind of blends in nicely. It's a little trick you learn along the way. When I'm done with this, it's very important before I put the stain on to use a layer of polyurethane sanding sealer over the paint. Otherwise, when you're trying to apply the stain, it will lift the paint right off. You'll waste a lot of time. So here goes the sanding sealer on the piece, and then the magic happens when I put the stain on and then begin to wipe it off. It really makes the piece sing when I do that. I like to use a dry towel first and then come back with a wet towel and just really sharpen it up. And that's the way he looks. Of course, you need a final coat of polyurethane, water-based poly. I like a flat surface because it tends to work best for me. And that's it, my little Santa post. Thanks for watching.